Cross sports of a successful coach one to the other and how they do things?
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of admiration for him. I mean, I'm just a big fan of his and how he communicates in public and how he communicates with his players. I just love the fact that he's right out there with everything. There's a certain side of you that you feel emotional for a guy like that too when it comes to an end, because you can understand how much time he's invested in the sport and in people and so on, and how clear-cut in his mind he was just on the finalization of it. That's sad in some ways.
You're a recruiting class, Baseball America rated him #1.
Mm-hmm.
Just how rejuvenating is that to win on the field, but to know that it's just as good of what's coming in as what you lost?
Well, I don't know if a #1 ranking really sets in personally with me in terms of looking at the kids. I think the quality of the kids, both academically and athletically, is good. I mean, we see that. We don't take for granted that they're here. They certainly could have chosen another place to go to school and play baseball. So we're certainly happy that a lot of them showed up and are engaging themselves. It's like I said, there's a lot of progressions that have to take place in order for them to even be here to begin with. So we're just thankful that they are.
Did the draft not hit you quite as hard this year maybe as it did the year before? Or you feel like it hit you pretty hard still?
Yeah, it affected us. To what degree, I don't know. I mean, we have the right amount of players on our roster right now, but had maybe one or two more guys showed up, it would have increased the intra-team competition that you're looking for in order to improve your team. I mean, there's part of that you need. There's also a part of it, though, that sometimes too many is not a good thing, at least for the guy that has to make the final decision at the end and sit down and talk with these kids. And you're concerned about their feelings and you're concerned about their well-being, and that's the tough part of our sport is, we do have roster limitations, and so I think in a lot of ways it probably shook out the way it for the best. We've got the right amount of kids here and we're happy with that.
Seems like in baseball, when a guy is ranked real high in recruiting, it pans out usually. It's usually more accurate to project it. Do you see it that way compared to other sports?
Maybe so. Maybe there's a little bit more gray in football, in terms of that 2-star, 3-star, 4-star. Baseball, because they come under such visual scrutiny and evaluation since their 9th and 10th and 11th grade year, and then they fall under the evaluation of major league scouts and so on. So yes, probably to some degree their evaluation is more on point than maybe other sports.
Tim, how do you process that every time one of the guys you signed doesn't come to campus, or one of the guys on your roster goes early? Because on one hand, they're great players and you want them, but on the other hand, is there kind of like a sense of relief that, hey, somebody had to go, and that makes my job a little easier?
I don't think it's a relief at first. You want them all because there's so much time put into it, and I say time, particularly with Travis and Scott. They put a lot of time into communicating with these kids and developing a relationship. So when they don't show up, I think there's a loss. There's an emotional loss, and there's one that that's a shame. You'd love to see this kid on campus, and you'd like to see him develop. But the minute it happens, you move quickly on, because you understand that that's college baseball life. So they become a who, and then you put your time and effort into the people that are here.
How do you process that, though, when you're recruiting everything? Because you could have technically had like 50 or 51 guys back if everybody shows up.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody doesn't go pro, which is not going to happen. Is it almost like being an insurance guy or something, where you've got probabilities and we don't know who's going to leave, but somebody's going to leave? I mean, what's that like?
There's a lot of probabilities and a lot of guesstimates, and it's a big question mark in a lot of ways. You're dealing with monies that you don't know you're going to have and could have, and it makes for a difficult scenario. and balance of your class, it's always, knock on wood, panned out reasonably well. I mean, we've never really been overbooked that way, but there's always a year where it could be troublesome. You know, I've sat through those years before as an assistant coach, and they're very difficult to put together. But I don't really have any answers for it, because it's just somehow, some way, it usually works its way out.
Have you ever had a year that kind of threw you for a loop in the way that all materialized?
As an assistant, first year at Clemson, we lost 9 kids in our recruiting class, which was way more than half. And we lost them all while we were out in the College World Series. And I remember that summer being one of the toughest challenges ever as a coach, because you had to restock an entire class. You couldn't do that today. I don't think there's any way feasibly or any way to try to put a class together at the, very late like we did back then. But we haven't run into that issue so far. We've lost some kids, but for the most part we've retained 3/4 of a class.
Your team getting to use the baseball locker room yet this fall?
Yep, they're in there right now.
How long did it take them? Any longer or any quicker to get there than other teams? Or
No, I think just the right amount of time. I think that's always a balancing act with me personally, and it's not certainly not a punishment thing, not at all. I think there's a lot of lessons learned by not having things that you think you may have earned or should have when you show up, and it's just something I've always believed in. You're in the parenting business, and always will be, and I think there's a lot of value in earning something rather than it be given right away.
What's on the agenda for the rest of fall ball?
Oh, we're going to leave for Washington, D.C. tomorrow afternoon for fall break, and going to tour the Capitol, and then get back and integrate ourselves back into school on Monday, and then we've got black and gold next week, and then the week after, so it's starting to wind down a little bit.
What do you hope the team gets out of that trip to DC? Just a cultural type thing, a team bonding thing?
Well, I just think it's everything. I think it's another opportunity for you as a teacher to educate your kids in another area besides baseball. And there's very few times where they get to do other things besides baseball. So I look for opportunities within their schedule to get them off campus and do something that can educate them, that can increase their wealth of information. And certainly this is something I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to take them to the Capitol, because I don't know how many people have gone, and nor does it matter. I think if you've seen Washington, D.C. 2 or 3 times, you're doing yourself a service. So I just want to ingrain our country as much as possible, because I think sometimes that can get lost.
Anything athletically, baseball-wise, will do on the trip?
Yeah, and we'll play as well. We're going to play each other, but we'll practice and scrimmage and train off-site near DC, and then tour in the afternoon.
you got another school there that you can use their field?
Mm-hmm. We Coach Kostakopoulos at the Naval Academy, a friend of mine, and I called him when I came up with this idea and asked him if it would be possible, and he's been more than gracious to have us on their campus. That in itself is a huge plus, just for our kids to be on the Naval Academy campus.
1 day, 2 days of on the field work there? How many?
Three. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning. Be a tight schedule. There's a lot going on. We've got a lot of activity set for the kids, so I think they'll enjoy it. Sometimes when you go on these things, you don't know what to think, but I think when they're done with it, I think they'll be glad they did it.
Have you made any sorts of trips like this in the fall previously? Educational like this?
Not really. The education taking place in Japan and the Dominican Republic, but I thought about the NCAA only allows you to take that one trip every so often, so feel like there's so many things to see in this country, and I've thought about going to a lot of different places besides Washington, D.C., but I think this is a good trip for this particular group.
Tim, looked at your schedule online. Sometimes schools will list SEC tournament, NCAA regionals, Omaha. None of that's on yours. Is that coincidental or was that on purpose?
Kyle must have just put it up there and didn't ask me. No, yeah, I think that's fine. I think that's what it is. If we could just put one game up there, that would be perfect. Because really, you look at that thing and it's overwhelming sometimes to look at all those games and all those opponents and so on. So one game's really enough.
So that's not part of the earn the locker room, earn your hat.
I could tell you it is, but it's not. I didn't have anything to do with it.
Hayden Stone doing anything throwing wise yet? Where's he?
Not against hitters. He's still lengthening himself out. He's doing quite well. I like where he is. He's every time that have conversations with him about his arm, they're very positive. So that's a great sign for us, and hopefully we'll be able to get him moving. As the spring progresses. I'm thinking maybe March, but that's my best guess.
So you've been through this with a couple of guys over the years. You feel more comfortable about the process, having been through it a couple times now?
Well, it happens so much more now, so I think you become more knowing of it, and especially the real rehabilitation process. We went through it front and center with TJ Pecoraro, when he was going through it here, and then Mark Lamb, and then of course Sheffield and Navy Moore had the surgery prior to coming to Vanderbilt. So we've sat through it a few times, and I don't think any school is immune from it anymore. It happens more and more and more.
I mean, you see David Price go in the game at the time that he did in relief. Do you say that's weird, or do you say, I get what's going on here?
I kind of get what's going on. It kind of reminded me of our 2007 season when we brought him in against Michigan. So he's been in that role before. And for David, he was up the night before, so I assumed that they would try to fire his arm again. And knowing David, I know he would tell the manager, "I'm good whenever." I think you throw the roles out the window, as we do too when we get to Omaha that time of year. You tell the kids that now there's no more roles. You have to do what you have to do in order to survive and be successful. And I think at that point right there, David's very well aware of that notion.
How confounding is his playoff record to you, though, that he's 0-6 as a starter?
Oh, I think at some point that worm will turn. You look at Kershaw too, and he's in a very similar situation. And David's a kid that cares a lot about team. You say, well, of course everyone does. Well, caring a lot about team carries a different emotion for kids in several different ways. And with him, he wants to do well for the organization and for his teammates. And I'm not sure. I don't know how much that has to do with his situation, but there's a certain amount of luck that is associated with his record and so on. But when it's all said and done, I'm still giving him the baseball. I still trust him, and I'm sure Toronto does too, and that's why he was out there yesterday.
When it comes to strategy, Coach, can you help us understand? Have you ever pulled a starting pitcher who was 1 out away from being eligible for a win when you had a 6-run lead?
Well, I don't know. Yes, I pulled someone prior to 4 2/3,
Sure.
and I've done some very good pitchers. Probably Price. I know Tyler Beatty. I've pulled Fulmer close to it. And it's never fun pulling Fulmer from anything, let alone that area. I think it'd kill me if it happened then. But it just happens because your thought process is not on the kid at that point. It's just about the team, and you're just saying, okay, we got to do this at this moment. And obviously, they had a thought. They had enough information to know that this is the change that we have to make right now. It seems odd to the general public, but they know more than we do.
Tim, how are things shaping up middle infield? Are you seeing guys emerge there?
I'm just seeing guys grow more comfortable there, but you know, we have a few of them, and to me, they get better every day. They feel more comfortable. They're landing their throws across the diamond, the ball sticking in their glove, and there's some comfort that didn't exist maybe 3 weeks ago that does now, but nothing where I would tell you, hey, this guy's going to play shortstop and this guy's going to play second. Very competitive right now, and I think that's a good thing.
Any change to the format of Black and Gold weekend? Or?
No, we just play 5 games, and we'll start out with 2 9-inning games. I spoke with Brownie this morning about that format and how we're going to go through it. First 2 games will be 9 innings, and then I think after that we'll just kind of wait and see the availability of our pitching. But I always look forward to that. Look forward to any game, but those are neat experiences.
Do you manage a lot, or do you observe during that weekend? What's your approach?
I try to sit back and observe more than anything, and let Coach Hewitt and Coach Allen, who are 2 position coaches, coach either side, and then let Brownie work with them on the pitching. But I think it's a good opportunity for me to sit back and look at it as a whole, which you try to do anyway, but it just, from a competitive standpoint, it makes it nice to sit back and watch the kids play against one another.
Did you say your numbers on your roster or how they would be for the regular season now? I don't know what number you need to get at.
We're right now we're at 37, so you have to get to 35. So we're 2 over right now in terms of what you're allowed. So no, we're not right there yet, but you know, we're close.
Tim, do you have any thoughts on this debate, I guess, that's going on right now about guys in college sports, specifically football, right now staying 3 years? And if something did change in football, it'd probably be hard to argue that it couldn't change in baseball too, if guys happen to stay for the same time period.
Yeah, I don't know. Our situation has been the same for such a long period of time right now. I would enjoy kids staying for 4 years. First off, I'd love to see them complete their degree, especially someplace like this. That's the value I see behind it. And I also see that 12 months certainly makes a huge difference with a lot of kids. I've seen it time and time and time again. Then you see kids in our situation go out a little bit earlier than what you think, and it becomes a tough transition. But no, you can't replace this time. So once you're here, I'd love to see kids go through 4 years. I'm not really tied into the football mindset right now on how they think, although that sport has so many different components to it in terms of injury and lifespan, but at the same time, education, go to school, try to knock out your education, and that going 4 years would afford you the ability to try to do so.
Any of the pro players back at this point, or is it still a couple weeks away?
Yep, we've got a few of them, and I think some of them will start to come back here in the next month or so. I haven't seen Sonny yet. I know David's back Pedro's back in town, but I think it just gives them time to get with their families and get away from the game for a while.
How eager are you to see Dansby and Carson and Xander and some of those guys and sort of, close the book on their careers in the last couple of years? Will you sit down with them at some point and sort of review everything and say, a heartfelt thanks or whatever?
Yeah, that's the tough part of our sport. That closure part really bugs me. You get done with the season, and it's such a quick transition onto the next deal for them and for us. I don't care for that period at all. I would love for school to be in session another month so you'd have that opportunity to really sit down and talk with them, but you don't. You have those short conversations in the exit meetings, but you have 35 or 27 in a short amount of time, and we'll be able to talk some more and spend some time, but there's never really any closure to it, and I don't enjoy that part.
Will Dansby, Carson be back? What are you expecting them?
They'll be back at some point. I think we're getting our rings in January of the Auburn Vanderbilt basketball game, so I know they'll all be back for that. And they'll be around in January and February, so be neat. That's enjoyable for me selfishly when they're here. I love it when I can look down there and see 20, 25 guys working out at one time in the morning before we do. And I think it's a great resource for the kids too. We're very lucky to have that.
Tim, speaking of the schedule, there was some talk this spring of moving the start date back maybe to March and letting the season play on out maybe a little more through the summer, I suppose, and Omaha and everything. What are your thoughts on that? Is there any chance that you'll see some movement in the next few years?
I think that's tough because the further back you move Omaha, the more it gets blocked by other things that are going on. So I think my opinion is I never want to move something back too far because I think when you start to do that, there could be a loss of games, and I don't really want to see a loss of games in college baseball right now. I realize, like everyone, I mean, we're not in the South, so we have our fair share of condition issues, but at the same time, I would take those issues over maybe lessening our schedule and starting later, because I don't really see Omaha being pushed back later into July. I just don't think that's going to happen.
Any more questions? Tim, you talk about 4-year players. Kyle Smith's one. You don't get a lot of them. How's he done so far?
Good. Really done well on and off the field with the kids. There's certain things that you can see with the team, advancements that are being made that I see personally that are because of his influence. On the baseball field, I think he's doing well. You know, really rooting for that kid, personally.
Thanks. Thanks, Marcus.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
guys.